Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Inkylesconvo. And by the way, I really appreciate the support and love I've been getting just from even people that I've spoken to that necessarily don't even don't want to appear on the show, but I've said I love what you're doing and things like that. It means that it comes back and it helps go every single day when you get tired and fatigued. It does necessarily push everything through. So I do want to say thank you very much for that to start with. But today's guest is called Ged Mills. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. As I said to you before the show, you did put me to shame with your awesome logo behind you. I've just got my door and my wall, and you've got an amazing logo. It's cool. But so you're a man of many talents. You seem to put yourself in different positions. Whether I will talk about your past before, but just now you're involved with from what I can see, Talksport, content creators, Blackpool, and I don't know if do you still do stuff for the BBC, or are you done?
No, sort of done with that. I had a bit of a falling out with the BBC, so that put it this way, things were said more my part, and they haven't called me back. So that would be that. I would say that is me being dead in the water with the BBC. Listen, it got to a situation where, there's great people, and the BBC is a great organisation, and it's a brilliant medium and a media hub. And I'm very jealous of the BBC because obviously we're, now with our new studios and stuff, we're, creating content and media and stuff, and you're just the BBC, their powerhouse is just. It's amazing, and the whole license fee debate is, this is going to rumble on for years and years and years, possibly until it's, it won't, even if they scrap, they went, right, no, everyone has to pay, it's subscription based only, do you know what I mean? There'll still be arguments of whether, it should be for everyone and there's free for people and not. So that's going to rumble on however it goes, but yeah, it's for me, I always, when I first started in radio, I always wanted, I've had targets in my life, I always set targets in my life. And one of those targets was always I wanted to work for the BBC, see what it was like, because it's the British broadcaster. So that was always a big aim of mine, to work there. And obviously when I was in commercial radio, I used to listen to everything basically, because I was obsessed with it. And the BBC obviously was stations and TV programs and online and stuff. Anyway, then I finally made the move and got to work for the BBC. But it just didn't come up to my expectations of I came from a commercial world there was so much fun in commercial radio. I'm talking, this was very late 90s, early 2000s, and people, I don't doubt, who've worked in commercial radio for the 70s, 80s, beyond. But I can only say of my experiences in certainly early 2000s, it was just the best place to work. It was the best job in the world. And bear in mind, we were on peanuts. Money-wise, we were on nothing. I mean, I used to, my show fee at the time, I was doing an evening show, I was on £30 a show. And so you couldn't live off it, but their remit was, and their sort of, for you to do it was, well, it'll give you a name to so I DJ'd as well. So it'll give you more of a bit of clout when you go into maybe some bars or clubs and stuff. I suppose it did a little bit maybe, but nothing huge. But again, we were DJing. So, and then working on the radio a little bit was just kind of pocket money, if you will. So, but you fell in love with it. But what the point why you went back and you kept working for 30 quid a show was that it was just so much fun. It was, you wanted to go to work. It was, when you had program meetings, you were desperate to be involved, and the ideas and the creative spark, and gosh, some of the ideas, some crazy, stupid ideas, but that would fold in and work its way into an idea that made it onto the radio. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, commercial radio was just an unbelievably creative, brilliant place. You wouldn't, I would say as well, I don't think you'd get away with half the stuff we did nowadays, just with the, you know, the way the world has evolved in political correctness and everything like that, because, you know, blimey, what some of the stuff that was said, you'd never get away with at all. But like, I mean, times change, don't they? And, and we've all gone through that. So, excuse me. So when I went to the BBC, you know, it already was. I found it to be quite corporate, and I struggled. I did struggle with that. I struggled with the fact that it was quiet. So you'd sit in the radio office, and no one was saying anything, and it was, you know, in commercial radio, we're being told to, you know, shut up, or, you know, you're too loud or something like that, because we were just laughing or just being stupid. At the BBC, it was very much a corporate. I always say it was like working at an accountant's. Everyone's heads down, just in the work, and you had a shift pattern, and you had to work to that shift pattern. And that wasn't me. So I just was like, listen, I'm going to get my job done. I'll smash it out. I don't care about dinner. I'll just work through it, and I'll go home an hour earlier. Oh no, you've got to have your dinner. You've got to take an hour for your dinner. And then it was like, well, I'll just eat it here because I'm in the zone of editing an interview or something. But then you were like, well, and then half the time you'd be finished, and then you just have to sit around. And there literally was nothing else you could do, because obviously, say you were in football matches, the games were that night. Well, you can't predict what the game's going to be, so you couldn't do anything for the day after. So yeah, I found that quite tough. I found corporate world quite tough. I found, I suppose I should have known, really. I got sacked from Littlewoods, you know, the catalogue. Remember the catalogue, Littlewoods?
Yeah.
On the phone. I got sacked from there when I was young anyway, because, and that was a very similar situation. It was people ringing to put orders in, you know, so, and it was the data that was like on the screens and stuff about, you only their rules were something like 42 minutes for lunch, a 15-minute break, but you had to be, so you clock off at, there's like a little buzzer that came up, and then you could clock off. You literally turn your phone on mute, went to the canteen, had a quick brew, but you had to be back. So technically it was only a 12-minute break, because it'd take you 3 minutes to walk, there. And it was just, and if you weren't there, someone was on at you going, why aren't you on your desk? And you're like, geez, it's a minute. But a minute to them is potentially 2 orders, so it's money and stuff. So yeah, I got sacked from there because, again, I disagreed with with how they were working, and that was when I was like 17. So I didn't agree with how they were growing their multi-million-pound business. But look where they are now. Who are they? So was I right? Yeah. I don't know. But listen, that I think I maybe should have realised from them. But I had a good time at the BBC. But yeah, we fell out in the end just because, I wasn't overly happy with the corporate world of kind of how that worked, and just the way they were making decisions on the basis of like corporate decisions, and it didn't sit well with me. So yeah, that's kind of how that was. So yeah, sadly my time at the BBC came to an end, but all good things and all that sort of stuff. Look forward and crack on.
Yeah, every cloud has a silver lining, as they say.
Yeah.
But something that I seem to be finding, and I know that people that are listening, I seem to be finding, everybody seems to, if not like their start, they all kind of not even originate, but they all kind of have that little thing where they're at Bauer Media. Like everybody I've noticed it's in like certain positions. It's like Bauer Media and then their positions, and then Bauer, and then where it be. Would you agree on that as well? Have you felt like that? Because I know yourself, you kind of were at Bauer after your degree, and then you kind of progressed from there, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Again, I think most people, the reason why most people have got maybe Bauer on the CVs is because probably most people have got Global on the CVs, and most people have got BBC on the CVs. Because if you think about it, they are the three giants in the media world. So that's possibly how it is. But again, I suppose, the aspiration of when I first started, I started at Radio Wave, which is a local station for Blackpool. And we were the wireless group, and then we changed to, under Kelvin Mackenzie, that was. Then we changed to UTV. It was bought out by UTV, which is Ulster Television, which is so ITV regional. I don't know where you're based, but ours is like Granada. So you might have North or Tyne Tees, or So when ITV splits its news, for us it goes like Granada Reports, and it's a regional news service. So
yeah.
Whatever.
Ours is Perthshire. We get Perthshire because I stay just near Perth. The others up the way from Perth, so we get Perth. But
yeah, so UTV was kind of that sort of regional arm of ITV, a lot bigger because it produced its own programs for Ireland and stuff like that, Northern Ireland. So they bought us out, and then we went back to the wireless group, which it is now. I mean, Talksport's still wireless group, so that's what it is now. But I moved to Rock FM, where I worked, and I did the shows there. I was at Radio Wave, but I was from a little village which was right in between Preston and Blackpool. And so when I was growing up, there was a couple of radio stations really, but Radio Wave only started in sort of May 92. But before that, obviously our listening was it was all Rock FM, because that station was for Preston and Blackpool. And it was a big station, a huge sounding station. It was based in an old church. They had all the cars branded up. You know what I mean? It was like, as a young kid, you were like, "Oh, this looks brilliant," and it was super exciting. The studios were always really fancy and stuff, and they were owned by EMAP at the time, who were bought out by Bauer Media. And so your stations like Key 103 at the time, Radio City, they were all EMAP, and then they were bought out by Bauer. So for me, when I worked on Radio Wave, again, a big goal of mine was to have a show on Rock FM. So that was because I'd always listened to it and I always wanted to do it. So I really pressed to do that, and did. So, and it was a big regional radio station. So yeah, anyone that, so I do get that. There'll be a lot of people, if you sort of broadcasters and anyone in media, will work for Bauer just because of how big they are. And same with Global. I mean, I've never worked for Global, never. But if I say was looking for another job, Global would be on the list because of it has so many media jobs because of how big it is. It's taken pretty much over everything. And it's the same with Bauer. It just has so many radio stations and so many different jobs that it would be hard to say, oh, we're not looking at them anymore. So I don't, whether people go, I don't know, from Bauer upwards or hit Bauer at the end of their career, I just think it's because of their size. That's it. I think that's it, really.
Yeah, I get it. I agree. When I have found, though, like I was saying about how people always seem to be at Bauer, and then speaking to people, they're like, yeah, because it's so big. But they say you probably find as well, something that other answers I've got is that you probably find as well is because there's so much opportunity in Bauer as well because of how big it is. So people are obviously going to go to a huge company, like you're saying, with opportunities, job progression, and then it looks good on your CV to then move on, to various other jobs. But so UTV and Radio Wave you were saying because you were a radio presenter for them, so you're saying they were effectively the same. Were you based at like the same base, or was it like different places?
Yeah, no, different places. So Radio Wave had its own own station. It was set up by a local group, if you will, man, and a consortium of, I think, 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a dream, and how that came about was basically Rock FM, say, was this radio station for Preston and Blackpool,
Mm-hmm.
but to transmit the frequency to Preston and Blackpool, of course, it had to have a big enough transmitter to get the 20 odd miles and radius between there, and then broadcast to its patch. Mm-hmm. So that meant that the transmitter obviously was quite large. Mm-hmm. So that also meant that they could broadcast to a further area, to Lancashire, for example. And the owner at the time was a guy called Owen Oyston. I don't know if you know much about Owen Oyston. Owen Oyston owned Blackpool Football Club. And if you Google Owen Oyston and Blackpool Football Club, you'll find all sorts of articles. But Owen Oyston was a big player in media. He owned Rock FM, he owned Key 103, he owned a lot of radio stations, and he owned a lot of things. He was a very wealthy man. But what he did, he said, well, because we've got the power in the transmitter, can we open it up to a Lancashire and beyond radio station? Because it could be heard in Manchester and Liverpool, it could be heard everywhere. It was massive because of the transmitter size. Mm-hmm. When he opened it up, because therefore he was like, well, if we can open it up to a bigger audience, we can get more advertising revenue in, with maybe some bigger clients, therefore we make more money. But what happened there is that when he opened the transmitter up and then opened it to more of a regional radio station, that technically meant that Blackpool wasn't being served with a local radio station, and Preston wasn't being served as a local radio station. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So therefore opened the gates for a local radio station to be opened in Blackpool to serve the community. And that's how Radio Wave came about. So it came about by, a few local people literally sticking their own money in and giving it the biggest risk ever. But they made it happen. And then, they sold it quite soon after, 5-6 years after, I think, for quite a sum of money, because it was very, successful, and they did really well with it. And then they sold it, first of all, to, it was called the Radio Group or something like that. And then Wireless Group bought it. And that's when groups started to buy up these little independent radio stations and, take them and have them as a cluster of stations. And again, it just makes total sense. Like Global have just done, they've just taken radio stations and bought groups and then put them in as one. So we were our own, building our own radio station here in Blackpool, but we were under an umbrella of a big group.
Mm-hmm. So just before we get into Talksport and that, I do have a question, because you're probably, not probably, I would say you actually are the best person to ask this. I was to give a bit of context for ask this. I was speaking to a couple of people that do because we're kind of involved. I know I've obviously got friends that do podcasts and stuff, and we were talking about that. And one of them's a radio presenter. And we were speaking, and we asked him the other day, I said to him, I was like, what do you think? This is a question as well, by the way. I said, do you think that podcasting is actually damaging radio? And the reason is because I don't personally think it is, but it's interesting to get people's thoughts on this, because when you don't draw listeners away from radio because they listen to obviously the person, but the radio station, what it plays, music, and so on. But talent is now going to podcasting because they can be itself. What's your opinion on that one?
So I'm just going to bring up someone sent me a stat on podcasting. I've got it here because, like I said, we built our own podcast studios here and stuff like that, and we've built our own radio station. So we're potentially hoping to do both. But it says here, some interesting podcast data from the latest Radar study. So podcasts are listened to by 20% of the UK each week. 94% listen to podcasts alone. 50% of listening is at home. And 77% of listening is on a phone. So, out and about. Mm-hmm. I think it is very interesting. I think that, so where podcasting and radio goes hand in hand, is stations like Talksport, our group, Talk Radio, Times Radio, I think LBC, I think things like Radio 4, anything sort of, for me, talk based, because it's just a great way of showing highlights. You can go, I've had 4 or 5 great guests on this week. So we're going to do a weekly podcast from our program, and it's just a highlights reel. So when we used to send stuff to our award ceremonies or radio award things, you had to draw in, you had to record all your shows. And then every day you go, oh, that was a good bit. Right, we'll take that and we'll store that in the archive. So when the award season comes up, you can have a listen through and see what you can piece together. What podcasting is doing is basically making you, I think it makes you better, because I think it was quite easy back in the day to just go, oh, let's just get that guest on, and it just fills 10 minutes. But if you were doing that for a whole week, your podcast would be a bit crap, because you guess, you wouldn't have much material to sort of draw on. So I think it makes people better. It's making people think harder and get better guests and do better things, because they know you pretty much have to put a highlights reel every week into a podcast. So I think that kind of podcasting works hand in hand with radio. I think podcasting is brilliant for brands or building a brand. So whether that is a business person that's got a business and then wants to build their own personal brand to then speak. I know lots of people in the sort of business sector that are going to use podcasting to build their own personal brand, to then do speaking events, to go to these conferences where people are paying $5,000 for a speaker for an hour, if you're good, if you know what you're doing. And people are using podcasting to try and leverage that kind of business for them. So that's another way of doing it. I honestly think it works, because on podcasting you can't do music. You can't do a top 10 music show or stuff like that. That's more online radio. So podcasting's very niche, and I don't think it does take away from radio. Because I think when people, I don't know about you, but there's times just I'm not in the mood to listen to someone waffling on for 45 minutes. And sometimes I just want to hear some music. And then I don't know, sometimes you might be in your car and you'll go through your phone and I have Apple Music or Spotify or whatever. And you just can't choose. It's just like, I don't know what mood I'm in. I don't know what I want to listen to. So sometimes just having the radio on and the music being picked for you, it's fine. It's good. I don't think it does damage it. I don't think it does. I think personally, I think it helps radio, just for the fact that it's bringing more people into the audio world. And I think that is not a bad thing for radio. But there's a lot of bland radio out there. And when I say that, and I mean that in the utmost respect, that they're just play the music and say a 30-second link in between. Do you know what I mean? So they're just literally there's not much personality going on. But hey, that's radio that is. I listen to that sort of radio because it's just picking the tunes for me. I don't want them to say too much, so it works. But that's not going to inform you or entertain you. Where I think podcasting, if you want to listen to like niche subjects on whatever you want, there's a podcast out there for it. But it means that you're listening to it in an audio world, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So no, I don't think it does. Don't think it does take away. Be interesting, maybe in 10 years' time, because everyone's like, oh, everyone's doing it now. But in 10 years' time, when everyone is doing podcasting, that'd be interesting to see if it does sort of take away from radio.
Yeah, it's always selective as well, because he asked me that, because obviously, well, as people will know, I do this and then I do another one. It's like, obviously podcasting is kind of my thing, where it be visual and audio. So I said the same to him. I was like, right now, I don't think it will. because you've still got your huge personalities. But if there was to take a shift, I think what will just happen is, like what you're saying, radio will just adapt to it and then start adapting podcasting and shows more into their shows. And then so eventually then there'll have to be something else that kind of takes podcasting. It'll still be there, but it won't be as big as it is now. And then it's waves. I said he said the same thing. He was like, look, it's just waves. All it is like just riding a wave. And right now we're at a certain point where eventually it'll go up, but what goes up comes down. So that's what he was saying. But
really interesting move from talk radio, and they're sort of moving into talk TV. So they stream a bit like what LBC, where they have the cameras on and then they clip it for social media. But talk radio, you can, if you go on YouTube, type talk radio TV, you can just watch the radio program. A lot. This happens a lot in America, especially in sports kind of fields and stuff like that. And it just works really well. But so it's radio, but it's being adapted for a new market, which is YouTube, as in like radio on the telly, and it's on YouTube and it's being streamed, and it's different information, and they're doing different shows for YouTube, not on the. So it's like you said, it's adapting. Radio's evolving, so still the medium's there, but it's evolving in a new way. So you have a look at talk radio stuff. They're really coming up with some, I think personally, I'm not being biased about this, because I remember when LBC were doing all the clips, the social media clips with the camera, I was like, brilliant. That is absolutely genius. Because what you're doing is, like, you might never listen to LBC, but someone might retweet a few things from that social account, and you'll watch it and you'll go, oh, what's LBC? And then you'll find it. And then you might become a listener. And I just thought it was, as in marketing, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Now everybody's doing 5 Live, Talksport, Talk Radio, even sort of a lot of commercial stations as well have the cameras, and because they clip the little like funny bits or controversial things, and they put them on social media. And I just think it's a super way of being creative with marketing and getting more people to listen, because that's what it's all about.
I mean, I do it as well.
Well,
I
exactly.
do it as well.
Exactly. And
preaching to the choir, as they say. I do it.
It's what it's all about. But talk radio now are going sort of even further. And again, it's really interesting to see what they're doing in their world of evolving their own brand and their own medium, and how they are a radio station, but broadcasting live on Talk TV and et cetera, and it's similar to what Virgin did. I love new things, that when super creative and bright, intelligent people come up with new ideas that you're just like, that is brilliant, that just works. And Virgin Radio did it when Chris Evans moved from Radio 2 to Virgin. Everyone was like, oh yeah, but the reason why everyone listened to him on Radio 2 because there was no adverts, and we loved it because there was no adverts. So Virgin kind of knew there'd be people will go to Chris Evans because they really like him and listen to him, but they might get a bit cheesed off because the adverts are on, where at Radio 2 there wasn't any adverts. So what did they do? They just went to Sky and went, do you want to buy the whole show? And what we'll do, we'll not play any adverts in the breakfast show. And what Chris Evans will do is just read, Chris Evans Breakfast Show brought to you by Sky. Coming out tomorrow is the new Sex and the City program or whatever. So there's no adverts. And I just was like, that is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. So Virgin Radio is a commercial radio, so it has to sell advertising to work. So, but the problem is, it's the one thing most people say, oh, it's too many adverts. You hear it all the time. Too many adverts, whether it's TV, radio, whatever, papers, social media, even these days. But how did they overcome? There's a problem there. So how did they overcome that and get around it? Well, they sold the whole show to Sky, and I just thought it was brilliant, and it works because his figures went through the roof in the first set of radar figures he has, and it was just over 1 million, which for a startup kind of radio stations it was. I know there's an old brand there, but it was unheard of. So it was brilliant. And then Talksport 2 did it with the cricket when they got some of the cricket series. from Five Live, and that was a big because Five Live always had Test Match Special. It's an institution. It's been there for 3,000 years. So people are very much ingrained. No, this is our Test cricket is always on Five Live and stuff like this. Talksport too, and Talksport, disrupted that market and was like, well, we'll buy it. And they bought the Winter Test series. I can't remember which one it was now. And again, there's going to be too many adverts. We're going to miss wickets because there'll be an advert being played. There'll be loads. They just had one sponsor buy the whole thing, and it was just you're just brilliant. That is just for me where just thinking outside the box. And I think in this day and age where technology can help and there's new technologies about that can do things for us, I think there's a lot of opportunities. And they very clever like that. And I love things like that. It's great.
Yeah, it's about innovating as well. There's always, you've got to, it's not even necessarily reinventing yourself. It's not like reinventing. A great saying was when I got told when I started doing my podcast, and was don't reinvent the wheel, just make it a different color. It's exactly what I got told. It's just, there's no point changing the way something is, but you have to kind of innovate to an extent, keep it real in that, but then, as I say, change your color. But yeah, you're very right. I mean, I do think that, as I was saying, radio is definitely mainly majority having, not all radio, but radio is mainly majority having one sponsor, which again is a great idea, because one, a brand exposure, obviously it's going to cost X amount of money, but if you're predominantly listening to that show, that's predominantly your consumers, so you can market to that person. So if you're marketing to that person, you're going to know exactly what they want, what they wear, what they buy, if it's clothing or anything like that. It is genius. It's really, really genius, to be fair.
I'm surprised, and maybe they've looked into it at the moment. I don't know, but I'm surprised. Bauer and Global. So Bauer have got the hits, and they've got greatest hits. Global obviously have got Heart and other stations. But I'm surprised, for example, Heart haven't contacted Kellogg's, and all of their breakfast shows are just sponsored by Kellogg's. So there's no adverts. Every breakfast show is sponsored by Kellogg's. So Kellogg's might have to pay, 25 million quid for that whole year's worth of advertising. But the amount of listeners in that peak breakfast morning, from the London market of the Heart London to everywhere, like you said, there's no other adverts getting in the way. It's just going to be Kellogg's being. So I'm surprised that's not. Maybe it can't. I don't know. Maybe they're not allowed to. But I don't know. But I'm sure you could. But yeah, it surprises me they've not done something like that, or tried. But they may have. And like I say, listen, we're in COVID, so marketing budgets aren't exactly through the roof at the moment. But it wouldn't surprise me if anything like that happened. One big brand took over a group's kind of breakfast show or a drive time or something. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah,
I think that's like I was saying earlier. I do think that that's the way they can't innovate to keep it personal, because there is certain radio stations out there that I don't necessarily want to mention any names, but when you do listen to them, they play maybe 3 or 4 minutes of adverts, and then you're hearing the guy's voice for maybe 5 minutes. So you don't actually even know who you're listening to. So he's having to introduce himself every single time, even though you can see who it is and stuff. But then you're like, why are you doing that? And then you're like, well, because there's adverts playing all the time, because you're only hearing his voice for 5-10 minutes. I do think there needs to be a revamp of that, where you're like what you're saying is exactly right. Buying shows, just keeping it outright, because you could sponsor the show and the person. So you're relating to it on air, and then off air you're still getting that marketing because the person's still branding themselves to him. It is the next level of marketing. I see that being one way they could innovate. But what you were saying about the constant live streaming, That's a good idea as well. Like even having a camera in the studio and having it constantly going so they can link it to YouTube or, like you're saying, TV or something like that. Because that's the effect. Well, effectively, you've hit the nail on the head there. Like that's effectively where we need to go. You need to have visual and audio, not just audio now, because people kind of like both. They kind of follow things that have both now. It's definitely different, to be honest with you. So you went from the BBC to Talksport, and I'm curious because were you involved when you were at the BBC? Were you involved in sport, or what was your show? Because to go from there to Talksport, it can be,
No, it was. To be fair, it kind of didn't. It worked. So what happened was I went back to university to do a master's degree because I was doing the breakfast show at Radio Wave. And I was coming up to 10 years on the breakfast show. And I was kind of looking at, well, I knew what was happening in local radio. You could see what was happening in local radio. You could see that like Heart had taken over quite a few stations, and you could see them changing branding, and Magic was doing the same with Bauer and stuff. You could see what was happening. So you could see also that it was more than likely going to happen at Radio Wave. You could see that, and it has happened, but you could see that was going to happen. So I was coming up to 10 years, and I was sort of ready to, listen, I loved it there. It was, I say, the best job I've ever had. But I think, I didn't want to sit back and sort of then be told, well, that's it, your job's gone, because I think it's really hard to find a job in radio, definitely, when you haven't got a job. I think it's easier, and I think that's in any walk of life. It's easier to get a job when you've got a job, because you're not under pressure. If they don't give you a job, well, you've still got a job, so you're okay. But I went and got my master's degree at University of Central Lancashire in broadcast journalism, and we were doing sort of digital journalism at the same time as well, really. And it was really to try and get to the BBC, because that was a place I really wanted to work. But my ultimate goal, when I was on like the evening show at Radio Wave, my ultimate goal was because I've always been into sport, I've always loved sport. I always wanted to do a show on Talksport. That was my absolute goal in life. So when I was at Wave, that was still there, and I won Best Presenter Award for UTV in around 2009, I think it was. And we had to go to London, and we were presented this award. And again, it was lots of people up against you and stuff. So it was a big award. So I got the award, and I remember a few days after, I was like, right, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. The head of Talksport literally gave me the award. He was actually presenting the award to me. So I was like, brilliant, we've already kind of made a bit of a connection. And I emailed him, and he emailed me back, but he was a bit non-committal. He was a bit sort of like, well, maybe it's just not quite there yet and stuff like that. And it really sort of, right, okay, so I'm going to try harder. And that gave that fire to, that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to do my own show. And it just wasn't, I just weren't, I was going for jobs and just not hearing anything back. And you just like, people tell you that, oh, you're good at what you do and we really enjoy it and stuff like that. And you're like, well, surely not everyone's lying to you. Surely that people are being honest. Mm-hmm. And the figures were proving it, figures were good. So it was more like, well, why are they just not bothering? So anyway, so I thought, well, I'm going to try a different angle, different tact. I think if I had maybe a master's degree, would that help me and would the people I meet and get in contact with there, would that potentially help me get where I need to be? So anyway, I did that. But whilst I was doing that, at the very end of that course, it was only a year, at the very end, I got a call from somebody who I'd worked with before, who was working at Talksport as a weekend overnight producer. And he was like, listen, I'm kind of thinking of cutting back on my hours. I want to do a bit of a job share where I do one weekend and someone does another weekend. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, I think that's great. I think that'd be brilliant. Anyway, talked it through, and then he got in touch with the guys at Talksport to say, thinks, anyway, can you come for a meeting? Yes, I can. Went down there, we had a meeting, and they were like, well, yeah, so this works great if you think it can work, etc. So that was that. I was in the building. And the thing is that for me, it was always, if you get in the building, then you have an opportunity to prove what you can do. If you're not in the building, it's hard to prove to anyone. And I think that's the case in everything. But so I was in the building. But then at the same time, with my master's degree, we had to go on like work placements and stuff. And obviously I wasn't allowed to just say, yeah, I'm working at Radio Wave, so that's my workplace. We weren't allowed to do that. So I got, but my contract at Radio Wave, because I was on a presenter's contract, I wasn't allowed to work at Radio Lancashire because it was a rival. So I wasn't allowed to work there. So I wasn't allowed to go on placement there. So I had to go on placement at Cumbria, which is bloody miles away from where I was, but I had to do it. So I kind of worked there for a bit on placement, and quite quickly got doing sport stuff, sport bulletins, sport programs, commentaries. Because I used to do all the football commentary for Blackpool Football Club whilst I was at Wave. We did the sports show as well. So for 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, maybe longer, I was a football commentator as well. So I could do all that and everything. So and again, it was more sort of everything. If you kind of getting it, it's angling towards, can I get on Talksport? Can I get on Talksport? Can I get on Talksport? So I worked for the BBC, and so I was kind of working at the BBC and Talksport at the same time. And then I had to take the leap of faith, because I had to leave my breakfast show because I was getting this job at Talksport, which meant I had to leave on the Friday morning, and I wasn't coming back till the Monday afternoon. So I couldn't say to my Radio Wave, listen, I can only do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That just wouldn't, you can't do that. So I had to kind of make the leap of faith and say, right, I'm going to finish and I'm going to get a job. I'm going to go it was part-time, but I made up my hours in the week at BBC Cumbria. And then when I left Radio Wave kind of fully, I was then okay to work at Radio Lancashire, because I knew them from when I'd done all the commentary stuff at Blackpool. I knew the people that were, because they obviously commentated on the same games and stuff, because they were BBC, we were commercial. Again, I was like, listen, I've left. Is there any opportunities? And it pretty much happened very quickly. Within a few weeks, I was at BBC Radio Lancashire doing commentary. So it was more about surviving at the time, because I'd left this job that I was getting a wage from, and then I was kind of doing Talksport every other weekend. That was overnight producing, and then doing sort of lots of different jobs for the BBC in the week to just get by, really. But then I got the opportunity, because I wasn't on air at all. But the guy I worked with on Fridays was a guy called Tom Latcham, who he was an ex-News of the World journalist, similar age to me, and kind of was doing a show that I really kind of bought into, really liked what he was wanting to do. And because it was sport, but it wasn't like all sport. We could go off on tangents, and I was like, I think this is absolutely overnight radio. I've done overnight radio before at Rock FM, And they're the best listeners in the world, overnight people, because they listen. Breakfast radio listeners, even though you get the bigger audience, they're all taking the kids to schools and they're all rushing around. So actually, half the time, they don't listen to you. Do you know what I mean? Where overnight, it's normally a trucker, or it's normally someone who can't sleep, or it's normally people that are doing security work or whatever. But you are their sole friend at that time of night, because they're not ringing anyone at 3 a.m. because everyone else is in bed. So you are the only person that they're listening to, and you're the one that's communicating with them. And I remember when I was on Rock doing an overnight show, I remember the amount of interaction. I'd say something and the phone or the text would be always calling or texting or whatever, because people really listened to what you said and just wanted to get involved, just because they were probably bored, or, you know, they couldn't talk to anybody else, so they could talk to you because they knew you were there. And that was exactly the same at Talksport when we did the overnight. It was just, and again, it got that spark of, this is just good fun. It was just a great laugh. We just had a brilliant time, and it was just the best thing ever. But I was never. So I was kind of co-hosting at the time, at that point, on the Fridays, just because of kind of our relationship we had on air. So I'd kind of moved into that co-hosting role, but I was part of the London Bridge terror attacks in when was that? 2018 maybe. So I was there when it happened. So I was on shift, and I was like, there's something major going on, because we could hear all the sound, we could hear everything going on. So that's something major happening. So I was like, and Talk Radio were in the same building as us, because at this point we were in the old studios at Hatfields. We've moved to the new building now at London Bridge. And I was like, there's something major going on. So I spoke to the guys at Talk Radio, but they were like really understaffed, because it was brand new at the time. Like, well, we'll just take some stuff from Sky News. And I was like, well, I don't think that's good enough, really. I think we need to. So I went out, and it was pretty clear what was happening. And to the point where I was then being called up by the radio ops room at Talksport, going, you need to be very careful, because we think there's a third guy just going around with a machete. You need to basically get some sort of cover or something, because, and I was like, and now I'm in the middle of around Borough Market and London, going, while still trying to describe what's going on. We had helicopters, which we now know they were the special forces coming over, because again, we still thought this third guy was going around with a machete. People were literally running around, blood and all that. So it was quite a weird and surreal moment. But I remember we had to obviously call the big boss at the time, to say, listen, this is a major incident. And he was like, right, okay. And he obviously then must have listened right through the night. And it was at that point, it was on then, we'd done the show, I'd got home, it was Monday. And he rang me and was just like, listen, thanks for everything you did. You put yourself in loads of danger, which you shouldn't have done, sort of on the corporate side of things. But listen, you brought it to life, etc., etc. And he then offered me some cover work. And then when Tom had left doing the Saturday show, he then just went down to Fridays. I was kind of given the Saturday show for 18 months, until they were figuring, basically we got a new boss in and they were figuring out kind of how they were going to take the show. So then I had my own show, and it was just, but you know what the weird thing was? That was my dream done. Do you know what I mean? So I dreamed this since the age of, 18, 19. I told people, told my close friends, I really wanted, I'd love to do that. That'd be brilliant. And now I'd done it. So it was a case of, well, what now? And it's weird because when I went back doing, now I sort of produce with Martin Kellner, the overnight show, because he does the full weekend now, and we simulcast on Talk Radio, because he came from Talk Radio and they talk sport at the same time. There's jobs that people send me. So I got a job. Someone sent me a job for, I think it was Viking FM breakfast. Someone sent me another, but it's weird. 10 years ago, I'd have been right. Yeah, that's for me. That's for me. I could get that job. You know, I'm like, I could get that job. I'd be in a good position. I'm not saying I would, but I'm saying, you know, you just go, I think I could get that job. And I think I'd be good at that job. Now, I'm like, I've done it. I've done what I set out to do. And that weirdly puts you in this like frame of mind where you're like, well, what now? Like, what's my goal in life? I had a goal in life, and my goal in life was, and I was getting there. And all along the way, I was going different ways and zigzags, but I got to my goal. And now, well, what's the goal in life? Because I've done it. And I found myself genuinely I had about a year where I was like, I've kind of no purpose in a career. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My career, I didn't have a purpose. No job that came up, I was like, yeah, that I'd love to do that, because I'd done what I'd set out to do. So I had no purpose in my career, which was a really weird feeling and sensation, because it's just like, we all have goals. You'll have a dream. I don't know what your dream is, but you'll have a dream of something, but getting a job somewhere or doing something. You might never, most people never get there. Do you know what I mean? Most people never achieve that dream, because, you know, you've got to think big, but you might never hit it, but you might get to a certain level and you're just like, you know what, I at least I went for it, but I've got here and I'm bloody enjoying it. But for me, I got to what I wanted to do. And it has a negative impact on you in a weird way, because you should be overjoyed, and you are, it's brilliant. But then at the same time, you're sort of like, well, I don't know what to do now. I don't know where to go from here. It's a funny feeling.
Yeah, it I guess that's why they say, like, you should always have like it's an extraordinary story, by the way. But I guess that's why they say you should always have you know, dreams in the sky and dreams in the moon. So you kind of always have that drive. So you're never actually in that position to be, like you said, you're like, I don't know what to do here. So then, you know, that takes us to like what you do now, actually. Content creators Blackpool. Now, I know you've explained to me before the podcast what it is and stuff like that, and I'm sure people will know what it is, but did you ever see yourself like having your own business like you do now that's involved? Before we get into it strategically, I know you said, you know, presenting the show, but do you ever have in that head, you're like, I wonder what happens if I had my own company, my own thing? Was that ever a goal, or where did you know, Content Creators Blackpool come from?
Yeah, so being in radio, you're always self-employed. So I've always been self-employed since 16. So you're always looking after your own tax affairs. You're always, you're always looking after yourself. You didn't get sick, but you were always self-employed and always taking jobs on, going like kind of marketing yourself to get a job and all that. So, and I remember I'd set up a couple of businesses whilst I was on the radio that kind of fell by the wayside. I'd thought about lots of things. Because I am an ideas person. That was kind of why I think radio was very much for me. I was an ideas person. And yeah, I think I'd always, it was at the back, because again, radio was at the forefront of my mind, as in, and again, the goals, this is what I want to do, this is what I do. And I think sort of having my own thing has always been there. There's no doubt about it. And the reason why I say that is because when I sort of finished my goals and everything, and even whilst chasing the dream, I've always been wanting to do something sort of businessy related, whether that was property. I'd been to like property seminars. I'd set up like a little advertising company at one point. I'd done all sorts of, like, I'd had a DJ business, and I'd always had, but again, the radio was always at the forefront. So all these little things were there, and they were all kind of little, they were side hustles. But when I say side hustles, kind of, well, if they do all right, they do all right. If they don't, it don't matter, because radio is my forefront. And then when I got, it's obviously Talksport again, I wanted to, I'd wanted to do something and set up more of a business that was more sustainable, that we could grow. And I think that was it. I think when I said about what's now my purpose in life, I think the radio shift had gone, because it's not on my forefront now. I love what I do at Talksport, and that's why I still do it, because I love it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I wouldn't do it, but I love it, so I still do it. But whereas before everything was radio, now there is a shift. So we set up at COVID. When COVID hit, it was a strange time, because obviously I used to go to London every weekend. COVID hit, and obviously London was at the start of that because of how big it is. And they were like, listen, you can't come to London because of COVID. Trains were all over the place, so you probably never get there anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was really concerned, because like, I might lose all of my work here from London. Mm-hmm. And it was, it's decent money. So I was really concerned, because we'd just bought a house, we just had a baby, and all of those things. Yeah, so all those things were on your mat. You become responsible for a lot more things and a lot more people rather than just yourself. So so we set up at the time. We were like, right. I was speaking to my wife. I was like, we think we need to do something here to have, just in case London say, listen, we can't use you because you can't get here. There's not much you can do. So we'd set up a little sort of kids business, like teepees and sleepovers and bell tents, and for events and parties and all that sort of stuff, because we could, and we knew what we were doing, because I'd been like years ago, I'd been a kids entertainer, so I knew what I was doing. Mm. My wife was a dance teacher. She's a teacher in a school as well. So we know the market of that. And so we set it up just for basically, listen, this will just bring some money in, and then who knows? And then when COVID like hit big time, I was like, I might lose all my jobs here. So we need to ramp this up. So we ramped it up on the marketing side, and it took off in quite a big way. But then Talksport, I was able to create my own using technology and figuring it out, ringing people, and so, right, what can I do with this? Can I do that? How can I get into that? How can I all this? How can I make a network that is secure? So I was able to do it. So then Talksport were like, well, I was only doing Friday nights at the time. They went, well, because you can, do you want to do Friday and Saturday nights? And I'm like, yes, I do. 100% do, because I knew then this was more money, which was great in a COVID time, because I was like, well, that's good. That sets me there. Our other business was doing well. So I was like, great, because then if that falls off, at least I've got this. If this falls down, at least I've got that. So again, thinking of sort of being a self-employed person in a way, I had different revenues coming in, because all my events had gone. event hosting that we did, all of that had gone because all that work, bang, gone. So, so what was good is that we ended up replacing everything, but then the TP stuff, it just wasn't what I did. Do you know what I mean? It was just listen, it was a means to an end, and we did very well out of it. There's no doubt about it, but it wasn't what I did. And so I was like, right, I want a business that is absolutely what I do, what I know. And because of the Talksport, a bit of a studio and stuff, I was like, I think we can do this, and I think I can do this, and I think I can do that. Which was building a podcast studio, was building like a green screen and TV studio, and building a radio station here for what's potentially coming in the future. I was like, I know I can do that because I know what I need to do it. But then it's a different beast because we had to get a building. We had to, you know, your business rates, and it becomes a bigger beast. So you have to pay a lot out, and the amount of money you spend on getting everything and doing everything is different than just having a business at home that, well, if it don't work, it don't matter. You know, I've got bills to pay every month, whether this business brings in money or not. So it's got to, you know, you've got to find that money. Where at home, if you're doing a business at home, if you don't bring any business in that month, it doesn't matter because, you know, you're fine. So, so yeah, that's kind of where we got to on that. And we've literally just started. So we've been here about 3 weeks. We've just put everything in. And we've got a few things already in the pipeline, which is great. But it's still very new and very scary. And who knows? But we've got a plan and we've got a vision.
Yeah, but you know, congratulations as well. So just to, you know, I do have some questions I want to ask you, but just, you know, before we, you know, go into the as I say, the finishing questions now, but what sort of, it's like, say somebody is out there and like, because obviously a lot of people send their demos out, whatever, you know, whatever. What would you advise people to send? Like if you were looking, say, I'm not saying you are right now, but if you were looking for, we'll say presenters, or we'll say like producers, or, you know, anybody along those lines, runners of that, what would you say somebody does to get in touch with you to be like, you know, not necessarily for a job, but say like, if I was looking for a job, what would you be looking for?
It is completely different now. I mean, I do a lot of guest lecturing at University of Central Lancashire, where I did my master's degree. So I go back, I do a lot of voice training and TV and radio news days and stuff like that. And they are in that boat, you know, of they're just coming onto their third years, or they're the master's degree students, and obviously they're finishing. What are they doing? And I can't, in this business, I think unless a job is advertised, as in send me your demo and CV, I think the way to do it in this industry, no doubt about it, you've got to meet these people. You've got to meet who you want to be working with. So say you wanted to work at Bauer. Well, you need to work out, well, what bit of Bauer do you want to work? Because Bauer's magazines, it's huge, radio, it's everything. It's based in Germany. But so what do you want to do? So that's what you need to first find out. What actually do you want to do at Bauer? Or do you want to do it global, or at Wireless Group, or the BBC, or whatever? Mm. And then, okay, right, so I want to be a presenter. Okay, well, basically, who hires the presenters? So that's the next job. Who is the person that hires the presenters? Because there's no point in talking to me, for example, because you want a presenting job at Talksport, because I don't hire the presenters. So I can't then talk to my boss. There's no point. So then you need to find out who hires the presenters. And then, and I always say this, take them out for a coffee, buy them lunch. Everyone loves a free lunch. I love a free, you know, if someone came to me, I love a free lunch. Someone said to me they wanted a job here, And he went, can I take you out for lunch? I want to pick your brains on. Yeah, of course you can pick my brains on something if I've got a sandwich in front of me or whatever, And recently, you've probably seen it on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. A lad went for a job at BBC Sport website, I think, and he created a CV that was
it's off the actual website, and that was
and you know what? If he wasn't hired on the spot, then it's criminal. If he wasn't hired on the spot, that came in, then for me, whoever's hiring should not be in that building. And now I don't know if he was, but I'm saying, because the problem is with the BBC, they have to go through a bleeding interview process and all this sort of stuff. I think there's an exception there, because you go, he needs to be hired straight away. That for me is completely different. And a girl I know who works at BBC Cumbria now, she went for a job at Galaxy in Manchester, which is probably capital now, The Galaxy was like dance and R&B radio stations. And she went for a job at Galaxy, and she was a young presenter at the time. And she was brilliant. She turned up at the door. She literally knocked on the door and said, oh, and the receptionist opened the door. She was like, yeah. She went, oh, I've got a delivery for, I can't remember who the boss was called at the time. Right. And she came at about midday. She went, I've got a delivery for like John, the boss. And she was like, oh, okay. She buzzed up to the boss and went, oh, your McDonald's delivery's here. And he was like, I've not ordered a McDonald's. And she was like, oh, no, I've brought you a McDonald's. And he was like, so he was that sort of like, what? Just come upstairs. And she came upstairs and she literally plunked the McDonald's bag and went, I bought you like a Big Mac, and I've got a Big Mac and chips. And by the way, my demo is in there as well. And he went, you know what? I'm going to sit here for the half an hour. I'm going to listen to that demo. And he gave her a job on the back of that. And it's thinking outside the box. It's, I think nowadays, if you just send an email to someone saying, hi, I'm really interested in presenting. Hi, I'm really interested in producing. Hi, I'm really interested in being a creative digital person. Right? Probably get about 10 of them a day. So what are you doing to stand out from the crowd? And that's what you've got to do. And listen, if she traveled to Manchester. She's from our area, so it's about an hour away. Picked up a McDonald's, went to the door. And bear in mind, he might have been out. He could have been out. She didn't know, but she just took the chance. And then she'd have been stuck with 2 McDonald's meals and still this demo in her. You know what I mean? But she took the chance, and it paid off. And that's what I mean. It's like, I think sometimes as well, picking up the phone in this day and age. Can I speak to whoever? More than likely they'll say, oh, they're busy. Oh, they're out at the moment. They're not out. They're in, but they just can't bother talking to you. But that's what they'll say. But sending an email doesn't wash anymore. Because sadly, you can get through to anyone's email. It's so simple. But also at the same time, they can just delete it. Because if they're super busy,
You have to be doing that extracurricular activity, because I mind somebody at college, I won't mention his name, but the person said that, you do, as I'm speaking about me, he was like, you do a lot of other podcast stuff and that, how you find the time for college work and all this. And I was like, well, because college degree isn't just going to get you a job. You have, like you said it exactly. And anybody that knows or watched the show, on the second episode of this show, they had the senior creative producer at Bauer Media who turned around and said the exact same thing. You could have a degree here, amazing, I don't know what the numbers are, I think it's like 1-1 or maybe some 2-1 or some whatever it is. Anyway, you could have, let's just say an A degree here and nothing else. And then you could have a B degree, a podcast, a demo, any connection, something that's doing well, and they're going to take you over this guy, because this guy, they know that the person that kind of has done the extra stuff knows how to network, knows how to talk to people, knows how to produce, knows how to create, edit. It does. You're very right, and it's good. It's weird you say that, because, well, it's good and weird because everybody says it nowadays. Like, it's not just about CVs and that.
It's not. I mean, I'm looking. I'm on the lookout at the moment for basic content creators, and I've gone to the two colleges around here and been like, listen, I want, just send me a graphic, or first of all, get in contact.
Mm.
So get in contact with me, and then if they do, some don't, but so that's fine. But if they do, then I say, listen, have you got an example of a graphic or a video that you've made or edited, whatever, just so I can have a look at it. And a lot of them don't bother sending it. And you're just like, well, because then they'll say, I remember once I said all that, and they were like, and then I followed up on the email going, hi, you still sort of interested in this? And they were like, yeah, but I just want to know sort of like, what's the salary and all that? I'm like, well, I don't know if you can do the job. And this is the problem nowadays, is that when I started in radio, I probably did about a year of free work. I worked for free. I worked somewhere else, like Littlebuds, and then came to the radio station to work for free because I wanted to do it. And it paid off. And I'm going to tell you now, everyone I know that did free work at that time was in that building in a job, because they were good and they were keen and they wanted to do it. I remember there's a guy that we had at Wave. He was a local lad. He came to us at like 14, 15, and he was answering phones, but he had a real sort of spark for like jingle production and stuff like that. And he must have done so much free work for the radio station, like so much free work. He was doing breakfast stuff. Can you just create a jingle for this or create that or put that together? Yeah, that's fine. And he ended up working, when Chris Moores was on the Radio 1 breakfast show, he basically ended up, long time down the line, he created all this stuff for him. And that was just, if he'd have said at the time, oh, well, how much are you going to pay me for all that? They'd have gone, well, we haven't got any money. So, and if you're asking that question, then there's somebody else that wants to do it. But he did it, and it's not about free labor. What it's about is, are you interested? And what that does, it actually gets you a portfolio. It gets you, when you can go to maybe an employer and say, when someone then says, have you done this, and this, you go, yes, I have. And here are my examples. And they'll go, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, if you've never been in any sort of role, whether it's free or paid, and you've never done it, well, you've not got any experience at all. And I see it a lot at colleges, at university, where, there's some kids that literally will work for free, are happy to do it, to just get the portfolio experience. Now, more than likely, you end up getting paid for it as well. But do you know what I mean? It's just on the assumption working, you get a bit of portfolio experience. And the ones that are like, oh, I'm not doing that. All right, so what are you going to do? So you're not going to do that bit of production there. So what are you going to do otherwise? Well, I'm going to sit and play Fortnite at home. All right, well, that's not going to get you a job.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying, I'm very much for, you've got to pay people. I'm very much for that, because I've seen it where radio stations have used and abused people, where they've just got them in for free, done a job, and then say, see you later. So I've seen that, or to a point where these people do need to get paid, because we now rely on these people. Do you know what I mean? They're that good that we're actually now relying on them to do this work. And if they weren't here, we'd really miss them. So it's a case of, right, come on, these people do need a bit of money now. So I'm all up for that. But at the start, you've got to do, especially, listen, you want to work in Aldi all your life, you can get a job tomorrow and work in Aldi and work your way up, and you'll get a very good career out of it, because they're on more money than media industries. Do you know what I mean? But if you want to get in a world which is creative and there's not a lot of jobs about, and there's a lot of people wanting to get those jobs, you've really got to stand out, and you've really got to want it, because you've got to push yourself to do stuff for free, to turn up, to put yourself out there, to always put that call in, and just get as much experience as possible. And you'll get there. But there's certain industries you've just got to put yourself in that shop window to do. Now, like I say, there's certain industries, like supermarkets, certainly one of them, where you can just go in at 16 and work your way right up to the top. And I've said, I've got friends that do that and actually are on a lot of money, but they worked hard at it. But again, if you think about it, they're still in the shop window, aren't they? They still had to go, they probably went from a shop assistant to team leader, and they might not have got that extra bit of money, like they might, or hardly any money. But to go from team leader to the next step up where the money is a bit of a difference, you have to prove yourself that you can manage a team, and so in all industries, to be fair, there's a point in there where it's probably not worth the finance you're getting, is probably not worth it. But if you just look at the bigger goal, then it is worth it. But it's all mindset. All depends on your mindset, where you want to be.
Totally. And, as you said yourself, the guy that did the website, again, he probably thought that he'd be like, well, everybody's sending their CVs. Like, what is a CV nowadays anyway? So everybody was sending their CVs, everybody's doing this, but no one's actually given okay, so, but nobody's thought of even, like, for example, if he'd created something like that, nobody's even thought of putting that at the bottom of the CV, or check, please check the next page. And this is why. Even at that, that's still better than us. But it does come to a point now where, and as I say, going to university in September myself, where even I'm starting to realize that, like, you're just having a CV and just having a degree isn't going to get you a job in 5 years, 1 year. Right now it is crazy. But on that note though, with getting jobs and presenting and that, you're not the face of the company as such, but you kind of are a little bit, like, in a way you kind of are. So from that, do you think you should necessarily watch what you post on social media? And I don't mean like, the obvious subjects. I just mean like on the kind of like non-obvious and obvious stuff. Do you think you should kind of monitor, because you are like the face of a company, and, employers might be like, oh, he posts that, I don't really like that, or he's out all the time and, he's never working or anything. What's your opinion on
that? Yeah, I think it's on my sort of mantra for social media is, if you're not willing to say it to someone's face, then don't put it on social media. I've seen people not get jobs because of a post they might have done 2 or 3 years before. So I remember when I was at the BBC, there was, and bear in mind, I was just a freelancer, so I wasn't involved, but I remember overhearing a conversation, and someone had gone for a job at the BBC or just wanted some work or whatever. And about 3 years before or 4 years before, on their social media, I think it was something to do with the Jimmy Savile thing, because obviously that all came, and everyone was like, oh, well, the BBC and hiding it and this, that, and, there's all sorts of things about the BBC and Jimmy Savile. And he must have put on his social media about, having a go at the BBC, basically, over possibly their coverage, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but having a go at the BBC. And then 4 years later, he wants a job at the BBC. And I remember someone had not forgotten it. Someone who was in power had not forgotten that person had put that tweet out, I think it was. So he never got called in. He never got called in. And he probably doesn't know why, because he probably didn't tell him. He's probably thinking, well, why have I not done this, and why have I not? But that was why, because just one flippant remark, one flippant post, and someone remembered that. And it's so you've got to be careful. It's difficult, because I think now as an owner of a business that, you know, you want to deal with lots of different businesses, I think you've got to be careful. Like when I get businesses coming in here and we're talking to them, you know, you wouldn't, and you didn't know them, you won't be dreaming of talking about controversial remarks because you wouldn't know where they stand on it. So why would you do that on Twitter? It's weird. Everyone's a journalist these days. People forget that. Everyone's a journalist because once you put something out on social media, it's there to see, it's published. So everyone's a journalist. So it's like the cases, and I hope they do anyway, that they learn this in schools about the importance of posting on social media, what you post on social media and what can happen. Like, for example, there was the Lord McAlpine case about it was like there was named paedophiles, and it was on This Morning, and
that circle thing, yeah, there was a group of them or something.
And it was Sally Bercow, the Speaker's wife, basically put a kind of it was, I think they call it like it was a sarcastic kind of wink. So it was an emoji and a sarcastic wink using his name. And basically he went to court and she had to pay damages. He just said, give it to a children's charity. He didn't need the money. And he was never found guilty or anything like that. You know, it was made up, basically. Imagine that could destroy this guy. You know, this guy being called a paedophile is possibly the worst thing ever. Do you know what I mean? You're not, your life is destroyed. First of all, if you are a paedophile and you've found guilty, well, that's it, done. But if you're not a paedophile and you get called a paedophile and everyone calls you, that must, you know, you think everyone's just already convicted you. This guy gets found, no, absolutely nothing against him, but people are talking about you in that way on social media. And he just went after every single one of them. And it was interesting because, again, even accounts that had 400 followers or 300 followers, 200 followers, were all getting letters saying, we've seen this tweet that you've put out here, and it's defamatory. And if you don't make a donation to, I think it was Children in Need or something, we'll sue you. And if they didn't, they sued them. And it was on like 25 quid for some people, but they had to make that and basically apologize for it. It's really important.
I give you I do like to end on a certain question, so I'll ask you in a second, but I'll give you a funny story on that. Well, it's not funny, but I knew a guy once that I knew a guy once. I still know him, but you know, as they say, I knew a guy once, and he was getting bullied online, and he was, you know, he wasn't sure what to do, and then he had no idea. And it was getting it was like DMs, messages, comments. It was actually like, even I seen it, and I was like, this is mental. So the boy said to me one day, he was like, he came over to me in the gym at one, and he was like, you know, I feel really good about myself. And I was like, good, I'm glad, you know, I'm happy. And he was like, no, I want to tell you a story. So I was like, cool. So we sat me down on the one of the benches, and he said, I want to show you an email. I was like, cool. So he showed me this email. So what he'd done, I mean, it's, some people disagree with it, some people disagree. He got the boy's name that was giving him it was mainly one guy. It was more than one, but there was one guy that was like a predominant figure in it. So he got the guy's name. He then figured out what his actual name was, went on his Facebook, found out where he worked, and then took all the messages that he was getting online and sent it to the guy's employer. The guy's employer got back to him, turned around and says, we don't want this person representing our company. Don't worry, he's been terminated from the job. We're really sorry you had to put up with this from one of our former employees. It is coming to a point now where, like, as soon as he told me that, I was like, one, good on you for doing that, but two, that is mental that happened. It really does. Like, he didn't deserve it because the job he had was quite up there in a certain kind of thing. Just because I don't want to say too much, but he was up there in a certain kind of thing, and I was like, well, you kind of got what was coming to him then. Like, the employer was like, because you do have to remember, like, you are representing a company, and that company is owned by an individual. So
this whole, you know, when they say all views are my own, not of, where Microsoft or,
Yeah.
wherever you work.
Yeah.
A load of rubbish.
Hmm.
A load of rubbish. That statement is absolute tosh. So if you said on there, you said something quite controversial and you worked for the NHS, well, so like if you went on saying, vaccinations are all lies and fakes and all this sort of stuff, you work for the NHS. It's like, well, hang on a minute, aren't you telling the NHS is kind of telling people to do vaccinations? The NHS is giving out vaccinations and NHS is dealing with COVID. So, like you say, it's a complete mixed message. And it's that statement where it's like views are all my own, not of, it's absolute rubbish. Because you're right. If I put on something and started bullying someone, and then someone, or did anything, someone mentioned it to talk about, I would expect to be sacked. Because Talksport would be like, I actually don't want that kind of person in my building, because if they're doing it there, well, they could do it here. So, if someone said to me, one of your members of staff, and this is all the emails, first of all, you'd have to find out if they're true. That's one thing, because it's quite easy to make things up. If you find out the truth, then you won't want them, because you think, well, if they can do that out there, well, they can do that in here. And then it doesn't create a great working environment. If they've got that sort of personality, well, that's not very good. So I totally get that. But again, you've got to be very careful. On social media, my mantra always is, if you are not willing to say it out loud in the square with a megaphone and say that, then don't put it. That's simple as that.
Yeah, my mum always said that, she said that if you're not willing to say it directly to me in front of loads of people, don't, kind of the same thing, but obviously to her, she's like, don't mention it, just don't say it. And she was like, one, I would be questioning why you even had that, like why you even felt like you need to do it, because you should never. And as I say to everybody, a good note actually, as I say to everybody, that at the end of the day, it means that you're on somebody's mind all the time, but you should never let them get on your mind. And you're, at the end of the day, you are representing an employer, and like yourself. I mean, you wouldn't hire somebody that's being defamatory or that towards someone else. You just wouldn't do that, because you're like, oh, this is the type of person you hire. All sort of stuff.
So the first thing we do, and we've had people come through the door here. The first thing I tell you, the first thing I do is I check all their social medias. Just who they are. Who are they? What's their interests? Like, what are they putting on there? If someone came in through the door, but their social media was full of like racism and stuff, you're like, well, I can't have this person in my building. So it's the first thing you do. I assure you, the first thing employers do is when they see they'll Google you, and then they'll look at all your social media. It's the first thing they do. So, again, if your social media is full of controversial views, now I'm not saying, I'm one for sticking up for your own values and one for sticking up for your own views, but not if they're racist or, it's like, it's just, but don't put it on. Just don't put it on. Don't put on social media just what you won't say to someone's face. It is as simple as that. And if you're having a go at someone on social media, if you're actually willing to like meet that person and go, listen, I totally disagree with you, and I think you're wrong because of this and this. Well, that's okay, because you are willing to meet someone. But it's about being adult. It's about being an adult. We can all have a debate, and we can all disagree with each other. Me and you might have a feeling on something, and I'm like, I disagree with you there. We can still get on with each other, but we just don't have that same view. We don't have to scream and shout. You believe in one thing, I believe in another. You can, if you're an adult about it, you can still get on. And social media has its brilliant, things, but it unfortunately has its it's bad moments as well. But yeah, if you're looking at getting a job, have a look for his social media, because if you've had a go at that company, or if you said, like, for example, whatever, radio Heart, oh, I listened to Heart, it's absolutely terrible. What, the two presenters are on are just so whiny and blah blah blah, and then a year later you're like, oh, I really want to work as a news person on that breakfast program. Well, what happens if that presenter, you get the job, that presenter goes, what's this? You said we're whiny and this, you know what I mean? It's just like, now, unless you're willing to say, I actually think you are, and this is my reasons why. Well, yeah, just got to be careful, because people look at your social media account. So yeah, just be careful.
Yeah. No, again, I think we should end on a positive note. So I've got a positive question to ask, and something that I always ask the thing about social media, because I'm interested in the way, and I know I've had people that watch, that necessarily don't want to come on, but they watch them as support, obviously, which is amazing. Thank you for that. And they say they really like the social media question, because they wonder, and because it is such a big impact in our lives, and they've got children and they're bringing their kids up to be like, yeah, watch what you put, don't say this, don't put this on, blah, 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 blah. So have you ever had to face your fears before? And if you have, how did you face them, and how did you manage to use that to then, if that fear for that you had before, have you managed to use that to overcome it again? And I don't mean phobias, by the way, so like spiders or really deep water or nothing like that.
I think right now is the perfect example. The fear of, it's not the fear of failure, because the fear of failure shouldn't be a negative word. Failure should be a positive word, because if you fail at something or it doesn't work out, you can evaluate why, and then the next time you do it, you won't fail, because there'll be a reason why it didn't work out, a reason why it failed, a reason why it just didn't happen for you. And if you can work out what that reason was, well, the next time you do it, you won't fail. Do you know what I mean? So I think failure is always used as a negative word. I never think it should be used as a negative word. But a lot of people have a fear of failure. But I think for me, it's not, like I say, it's not a fear of failure. It's a fear of setting this business up, and I suppose for me, it's the fully committing. Fear of the full commitment. So I've had jobs before, and like I say, businesses for all sort of side hustles, done well, but I've never fully committed to go, right, we're taking it to the next level. And it's because you're like, I know, but to take it to the next level, we need about 40 or 50 grand or 100 grand. And to get that money, we either need to borrow it, or we need to basically use all our life savings, and essentially make the potential of making our lives worse than ever. So you go, well, okay then, we don't need to do that. So for me, it's just happened because I've fully committed into this building. And we've, I've spent a lot of money on it, and there comes a point where if this doesn't work, I'm going to be in a bit of a mess. So it's got to work. So it's that, for me, I think it's that's driving me on. It's and like I say, it's not a fear of failure for me. Because I use failure as a positive word. I suppose it's the commitment, the full commitment of finance that you've got to, there's loads of people who've got loads of great ideas, but to implement their ideas, they'll go, yeah, but you need about 100 grand. And most people don't have 100 grand.
No.
So they don't bother. But I can tell you now, if you tomorrow wanted to, if you had so much passion for something and wanted to find 100 grand because you were so passionate about something, you believed in it so much, you'd find 100 grand tomorrow. I know you'd be like, I don't know where, because I don't know, but you would find it. You'd ask people, you'd find people, you'd make connections with people, someone who'd believe in you, you'd meet someone who'll invest in you or whatever, but you'd find it. But you don't, because you're like, no, but you know, I've got to, I'm having, if I did this, it's the full commitment. Mm-hmm. So I'm going through it now, I think. I don't know, I'm going through it now. So it's the full commitment of I've opened up something that is taking a lot of time, taking a lot of money, and taking a lot of headspace that could have been, you know, essentially it might not work, but it's we're going fully committed for this. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
it did, yeah, because it shows that like you're willing to take the huge risk. I mean, risking is, like you said before, and like, you know, people who know, previous people have said in a podcast, they've never got anywhere without taking risks, never. Like you literally, a lot of people have like moved from, you know, I think it was where was it? I think it was Manchester, the University of Salford. I don't know if that's in Manchester or not.
Yeah, just outside, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, somebody that moved there. I think he moved from way up north, as in like Scotland, my direction, way down there with absolutely no money, and then actually made quite a living for himself because of what he did. And that wasn't necessarily radio, but it doesn't matter though. It's still the whole like taking it from different avenues and stuff. But yeah, so like, you know, on that note, I do want to thank you for coming on, you know, giving me your time and everything like that. And what I love to do though, if it's okay with yourself, is to get it even doesn't have to be your personal social medias, even the company's social media, so that maybe people can like follow along or pay attention or, you know, get in contact with yourself. It's completely up to yourself.
Yeah, so we're well, my personal ones are, I'm just checking now, because so we've got at Content Creators Blackpool, which is our business one, and that's Instagram. Well, Content Creators Blackpool is my Instagram, Facebook for the business, and my Instagram for me is Ged Mills UK. My Twitter is at Ged Mills, and my Facebook obviously is Ged Mills, and LinkedIn is just the same, Ged Mills as well. So yeah, listen, I'm always happy to help people, because, you know, I'm getting help. And I've had loads of help through my life. Loads of people have told me some brilliant advice that have got me into good positions and have helped me into the good positions. And I'm one of these people that always loves to do the same, because I think you have to, like I say, you have to. There's always someone out. If everyone closed the door, no one would get anywhere. So, and you know, so I'm very much one of those people. If anyone wants to ask me anything, anyone wants to connect, or anybody wants to anything on anything, for advice or to help them or whatever, if I can, I'll do as much as I can. I'm always a bit of an open book, because like I say, and also you never know who you meet in this weird, well, my industry of media. I've known people that were my boss, like big bosses, and then the group gets sold, and then they're doing something, and then someone else is the boss of them, and they were the boss, but they didn't treat them that well. And, you know, so I think, you know, you got to treat people nice, treat people fair. And I think you can go a long way on that, but also have an open door for people, because if just people need a helping hand and you can give them that, then they'll remember that. And you never know when you might need that person as well. You know, they might become super successful and you go, listen, do you remember me when I told you about this and you went on to do that? Well, I might need a bit of a helping hand. And they're the people that are more than likely going to go, you know what, you started me off. So yeah, here you go. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, and again, everybody, the usual note with me, as I say on every podcast since the Derek Johnson one, any mental health matters or anything like that, I'm sure Jed's the exact same, but any mental health matters you're having in that, my DMs are always open. Like, I'm glad the people I've managed to help from that one thing. Again, it's non-doctor advice, just with experience and what we're talking about. I'm so glad everybody's doing better, and, you know, just keep killing it. And at the end of the day, like, always remember that a no is only a no when it comes to jobs. Once, like, go back, create something better, and if they still say no, being like, okay, you're saying no, so what can I do to make that no into a yes? And if they're like, do this, 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 and this, you then do that at an advanced level, and it'll get you the job. Hopefully, get you the job and get you the passion. But again, thank you very much, Ged. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all later.